After going through this video, you will be able to explain the most commonly and widely used HTML tags used to create a web page. Explain how we use URLs internally while creating web pages. So let's continue our discussion on the most commonly and widely used HTML tags that are used to develop any website. When we write a resume, we use several formatting features such as bold to make our name in bold or to underline some important parts using underline formatting. Similarly, while creating an HTML web page, if we want to format the text, we have a few formatting tags. We will start with the bold and strong HTML tags. The reason why we are discussing both these tags together is that there is visually no difference in the content when we use them. This means we can use them interchangeably. Let's say we have this code in which we have used both the strong and bold HTML tags. Let's see its response in the browser. You can see that visually there is no difference. The only difference is how the screen reader deals with them. A screen reader is a software used by visually impaired people that helps them use a website. It translates on-screen information into speech. So if you use a screen reader for this code, it will give more importance to the strong text and will read in a different tone. If you want to check out how a screen reader deals with these tags, you can use the link given below the video in the resources. Please note that this screen reader is a Chrome extension, which means you will only be able to install and use it if you are using a Google Chrome web browser. Now we will discuss the italic and emphasized HTML tags. Both these tags are used to add the text in italics on a web page. Again, visually there is almost no difference between these two tags and can be used interchangeably. The only difference is how the screen reader deals with them. Let's see the response of this HTML code in the browser to understand better. You can see there is no difference visually. In this case, if we use a screen reader, then the emphasized text will be given more importance by the screen reader. The last formatting tag which we will discuss is the underline HTML tag. This HTML tag is used to underline any content on a web page. So, if we see the response of this code, you can see the content is underlined. Now, let's discuss the last HTML tag that we will cover in this topic, that is the image HTML tag. This HTML tag is very important as it is used to add an image on a web page. To understand better, let's have a look at this code in which we have used an image tag. Along with this, you can also see we have used a src attribute in which we have added additional information, which is basically the URL of the image which we want to add on the web page. Src stands for source here, and as a value for this attribute, we give the URL of the image we want to display inside double quotes. Let's see the response of this HTML code on the web page. There you go. You can see the logo of Internshala. Now, suppose if we want to replace this image with a text which on clicking will open the image. To do this, we use another attribute, alt, to add alternate text to the image. Now we have one more important term which we have not explained yet but are familiar with, and that is URL. If you recall, in the anchor tag, we saw how we used URL in the href attribute. And in case of image tag also, we used URL in the src attribute. So, a URL is the unique address of a resource on the internet. And a resource is anything like a web page or any file like an image or a PDF document. To understand this, let's take this same example which we discussed in the image tag. Here, the URL has two parts. The first is a domain name or the IP address that indicates a specific computer on the internet on which the resource is present, which in this case is the Internshala's host computer. If you recall, we discussed this in the last topic. And the second part of the path is the resource inside that computer. This path is always with respect to the folder which the web server can access, and that is c:/zamp/htdocs/. Remember, we discussed this in the last topic in detail that c:/zamp/htdocs is the default folder location on a host computer. So this URL indicates that on Internshala's host computer inside the htdocs folder, there must be a folder named static, which contains another folder named images, which contains a folder named common, which finally contains the image named new underscore internshala underscore logo dot svg. So the overall path of the image is this. Now, both these parts are preceded by HTTP or HTTPS. This complete URL is also called an absolute URL, and using an absolute URL, we can access any resource on the internet. Now, as you are already aware of a client-server communication channel, so how does the communication occur when we have such tags in our HTML file? Suppose this code is saved in the HTML file as home.html. Now first, the browser initiates an HTTP request for the HTML file, that is home.html. Then the web browser finds this file on its computer, that is the htdocs folder, and sends it back to the browser as a response. Note that till now the web browser has not opened the HTML file, and hence it is not even aware about the image to be fetched. It is only after the browser receives the response and when it starts rendering the HTML into visual format, it encounters the image tag, and that is when it fetches the image by making another HTTP request, this time to the Internshala server. And once the image is fetched, it is then displayed on the screen. Now suppose instead of Internshala's logo, you want to use your custom resource on a web page. Let's say this sample.png file. To do this, you need to add the logo or image in the htdocs folder and run it locally using this absolute URL. Now if you notice, there is a catch here. Here, the domain name is 127.0.0.1, which means your own computer. Users won't be able to view this image as the path defined for this image will refer to your local machine, which is not the server in which the website is hosted. To solve this problem, we need to buy a domain name for our users to access the website. What is a domain name and how to buy one is something you do not have to worry about right now. Over time, you will understand this. Let's say we have purchased the domain under the name mynewdomain.com. So this absolute URL will become like this. If you want to test the code in your machine, you need to use this URL. And when you want to host the website for the users, you need to use this URL. Now, don't you think this is a hectic process that you have to change the URL every time? But there is a way around. Let's simplify this with this image tag HTML code, which we have been using throughout this video. So when we work locally on our systems, we won't add the domain name in the URL. Instead, we just add the name of the image preceded by a / like this. Now let's say we are running the code in our local system. So we are using the 127.0.0.1 domain name, right? Now, what the browser does is that while it is rendering the HTML code line by line, and when it comes across this src equal to sample/png, it automatically prepends or adds the domain name. In this case, 127.0.0.1 in front of the image source, and hence the image is rendered and displayed. Now let's say this code has been put up on the server. In this case, the domain name that one would be using would be newdomain.com. So the browser, encountering the URL /sample.png, now prepends the new domain name before it instead of 127.0.0.1, thus fetching the image from this URL. Now what if I tell you there is another way where we don't need to use a new domain name or even the / in the URL like this? This is called a relative URL. It refers to the resource with respect to the current web page's URL. This means it generates the resource's URL from the current web page's URL. Sounds difficult, right? Let me simplify this. So, in relative URL, the part having the web page's name is removed, and the relative URL provided in the src attribute of the image is added like this. Now, let's say we have put the code on the server, and this is the absolute URL of the web page. So removing the web page's name and adding the resources URL will make this relative URL. So that's it for this video. Up next is the quiz. All the best.